Hi there. We're going to make a first attempt at UV unwrapping. Not my favorite subject. I have to be honest about that. Because in my professional years, before I stepped into education, I really didn't have any experience in it. It wasn't necessary. That's because it was all nerves and stuff like that. And later on, when I got into gaming, it was actually mandatory because you have to deal with polygons. Now, I just created a sphere, and let's change these dimensions to 40 by 10 and then 200. This is going to be a plank. Now, a fillet or bevel or chamfer or whatever you want to call it is basically mandatory because nowadays you don't have low poly models, I should say, with less than 6 polygons, which is a cube. I just switch on the fillet. It's a little bit large, and I'm just going to do it 1 and 1. So basically we have only one polygon on this edge at a 45-degree angle and some little triangles at the corners. That's all right. Triangles are not bad, but you should avoid them because they usually screw up your UV unwrap. Now, what I'm going to show you in this tutorial is just to use the most basic projection and the most basic textures. So I've already prepared this with the wood plank JPEG. I just grabbed something off the internet, and I'm just going to attach this to the cube, and you can tell it's all screwed up already. What it's doing is actually on all sides it's putting the whole texture map as it is. And the texture map is actually a bunch of planks. So next we're going to go to BP UV edit. But first of all, UV editing is only applied to polygon meshes. So this should be editable. Let's call this plank. All right. Okay, so everything's set up. My object is active, and I'm just going to turn over to BP UV edit. Now, this is a little bit daunting in that respect that it's not the usual interface that you get. Your attributes are in the middle, not to the right. Your object manager is basically here, and here is your UV unwrap, and here is your viewport. Now, one of the things that I do before I UV edit even a simple object is just center with the H the object in each viewport, and then just change the display to Garo shading lines, so I see the shading or the textures on each of the view. Alright, now I don't know why that is, but when you go down to materials, you have to get rid of this cross. You want to edit that, so it turns into a pencil. And here we have our texture. Looks pretty nice. It's not hand painted, but it's fine. And the only thing I'm missing is the sides, which is not that bad, but also the ends of the texture. So that's going to be a problem. I'll try to fix it, but basically it means that you have to have a texture with all the sides of the object in one single plane. Use square textures. 512 by 512, 1024 by 1024, whatever. Don't use anything non-square. I'll go into the details some other time, but just use square textures. It's easier. Now actually this doesn't look half bad. This is the end part. But first of all, I'm gonna select the polygons that I want to edit first. So I'm just taking the selection tool, and it's all turning to black, by the way. Let's see, do I have, no, I didn't have the thing selected. And I'm just gonna, no, I'm not gonna use that selection tool. I'm gonna use the rectangular selection tool, and with the options, only select visible elements is off. Now I'm gonna just select the top side, and with the shift key I can select the bottom side. Now this looks pretty screwed up, and it is. What I want to do is go to the top view. This is the view that I want to project my texture into. Projection tab is already open, and I'm just clicking on frontal, and I'm getting this. These are UV coordinates, not geometric coordinates. They're linked together, but it's not the same, because basically it's like a tablecloth over a table, and it can shift. Now obviously this is vertical, my planks are horizontal. So first of all, I need to go to UV coordinates. This is very important. These are geometric coordinates. This is everything with a checkerboard. An icon with a checkerboard is UVs. And I'm going to rotate it, but rotating it, and I just use this, I rotate, and I can't do it exactly. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to go down here to snapping, and I'm going to switch on the rotate on 45-degree angle. 45 degree is obviously not the correct angle, but if I, this is hard, if I rotate it far enough with the mouse, I can get a 90-degree angle. Now, all the tools, like the move tool, work exactly the same with geometric coordinates, and I'm just gonna flip it right here. I'm not gonna put it right to the edge because it will actually tile, so it will come back on the other end. And you can tell that this is not the whole plank. Now if you're pleased with this result, that's fine. But I want to have an entire plank on this front and exactly the same but mirrored on the bottom. So what I need to do is actually non-uniform scale. Why? Because I only need to scale it up a little bit over this axis and a lot over the x-axis. Now where you click is basically where you start scaling, so I'm going to start from this point. Now this is pretty tricky and you have to practice, because I always screw this up. Right, something like this, maybe a little bit more. See, now I'm going over and I'm actually tiling the texture. Something like this. This is fine. Looks good. So when I view my plank, that looks actually pretty good. Now the sides I can skip because the sides look good. Well, no. It becomes very grainy, and that's basically because the entire texture is squished in this elongated rectangle. So what I'm going to do is go to F3, which is the side view, and select something like this. Let's see if my options, no, only visible elements should be off. Now I got both sides, and I'll do push H, and I'll push frontal again. And here you can tell that it is horizontal, and I can actually pick, and you can tell where I am. And you basically have to have a sort of a split view here. You can just pick what you want from the texture. That could be a completely different side from the plank. It doesn't matter. Now, the only thing, and I've already told you that, is the end part. If I take the end part and I'll switch to front view, and let's take these into consideration, these little edges here. You can tell it's already, first of all, it's vertical, so I'll just do a frontal projection. Now, at least the projection is correct, and I'll just scale it down to something like this. Now, the smaller I make this area, the less pixels I get into my polygons, onto my texture. So when I'm using less than this, it will probably get very pixelated or very blurry, depending on the anti-aliasing. So be careful with that. Let's, well, you know what? Let's rotate this. And I'll just, this is already tricky. Come on, you can do it, yeah. And then I'll scale it down, because this is actually a tiny part of the plank. Move it, and I'll move it to here. And this might do. Okay, it's not perfect, and it's not ideal, but this actually looks like a plank. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can make 7 different looking planks that have the exact same geometric makeup. Using this with instances can actually build a complete house, which is pretty neat. And that's the whole assignment of Crap House. So on to the next.